In this lesson, we're going to talk about quote integration. At this point, you have done a lot of research and you have found a bunch of quotes. Now, the trick is, how do you actually blend them into your writing? And that's what integration means, is to blend in or to incorporate, things like that. First, we need to talk about what you should never do. You should never have a quotation stand alone as a complete sentence. That's when you just plop it in. And you may say things on either side of it, but the quote itself is just kind of plopped in. The other thing that we should never do is have a quotation stand alone as an incomplete sentence. That's almost even worse. But either way, it should never stand alone. So what can you do? There are 3 forms of quote integration that we're going to talk about. So you have some options, and as you're writing, you'll just want to think about which one will work best, depending on what you're saying and how you want to incorporate that evidence. So the first one you can do is the most basic. You just use an introductory phrase and then a comma. This introductory phrase or explanation does not serve as a complete sentence. It's just an introduction, and then you provide your quote. So a basic format for that would be according to somebody's name, comma, and then you provide what it is that they said in the article. And then you'll notice you do have a citation afterwards, and the period goes on the outside. And here's an example from the vaccines paper. So according to the Center for Disease Control, CDC, comma, and then I've got my quote, I've got my citation, it's an article title, so it's got quotation marks around it, and then it's in parentheses, and again, I've got my period outside. Okay. The second thing you can do is a complete sentence, but at that point you would use a colon and not a comma. And so it would be a complete sentence with the purpose of introducing the quote, but because it's a complete sentence and not just a phrase, you use the colon instead. So this would look like this in basic format: complete sentence, quotation, colon, quotation, citation, period. Okay. Here is an example from the same paper. So Christine Parkins, University of Southern California, makes an argument for what she calls collective immunity, otherwise known as herd immunity. That part is a complete sentence by itself. I don't have to necessarily follow it up with a quote. Of course I want to, because that really proves what I'm trying to say. But as it is, it can stand alone. However, because its purpose is to introduce my quote, which follows, I'm going to use a colon, and that just connects them. This sentence introduces this quote so that they go together, and my quote is not standing alone. And then got my quote, and then you'll notice I only did 446. That's something some of you missed on the example paper, which is fine. That was just practice. Some of you either did the title of the article, or you included Parkins with the page number, but because I've already said Parkins, I don't need to say Parkins again. I just need to put the page number, and you don't put a P or the word page, you just do the page number. So that one was pretty straightforward, and I think you guys just overthought it a little, but that is the answer on that one. Okay, and the last one is embedding. This one requires a little creativity, but sometimes it's just the best route. It works really well and it makes things flow. So, you just blend the quote into your own sentence. What that looks like is you'd have some of your words, part of the quote, and then more of your words to follow it up. And then you would, of course, have your citation. So, here's an example from the paper. So what I've put in red is my words. So I'm introducing Parkins also makes an argument about infants who are, and then I just kind of keep going, but I'm using quoted material, who are more susceptible to the complications of infectious diseases than other general population of children. That's what she said in her quote, and then I kind of connect it to the next part, and because they are too young to be vaccinated, comma, I'm quoting her again, herd immunity is particularly critical for them. There's my citation. Again, I've said Parkins, so I just need that. So you can see your words, quote, your words, quote. And that's how that one works. Okay. A couple notes on punctuation. Notice that there's only 2 punctuation marks. You can use a comma, that's with an introductory phrase, and then you can use a colon if it's a complete sentence. You don't use a semicolon, that's not the purpose of that punctuation. Punctuation that is part of the quoted text goes inside the quotation marks and then your period on the outside, so like this. So if there's an exclamation point or some other punctuation in it, you keep it inside and then you just put a period there just to kind of end everything. Or if it ends with a comma or something like that, you would keep the comma, put your period on the outside. Just like a lot of things in English, there's an exception. If you quote a complete sentence that otherwise ended in a period, you leave that period off. So no period, and you just have the one out here. So a little tricky, but not too complicated. Just look at your quote really quick, and this will become a PDF handout as well, so you don't have to watch the video every time. These slides are going to be in a handout form, and you can just quick reference, glance. Am I doing this right? Yep, good. You can move on. So yeah, that's it for quote integration. But I do want to give you a few other tips. So if you leave out words or phrases in the middle of a quotation, use an ellipses. So for example, if I went back to this one, if I didn't want to have anything here, but I left out some of her words, I would use the ellipses or the ... What that does is indicates to my reader, I've skipped something just so I can give you the two most important pieces. It's just being transparent, communicating with your audience. So you can use an ellipses. Use brackets to insert changes in a quotation that will make it fit into your sentence structure more smoothly. For example, maybe they're talking in present tense, but you're talking in past tense, so you could change a word and add an ed on the end. If you have questions about that or think it's needful, you can ask your teacher, but those are just a couple other tips for quote integration. And again, this will be made into a handout that will be underneath this video, so you can just refer to it again really quickly when you are working on this in your paper.